teachers to teach and integrate SEL and the Common Core. And many of you were here this morning, and you heard introductions, and I'm delighted that you're here to have heart-to-heart conversation around SEL and what it means as we integrate it with the content areas. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. But before we do, let me introduce someone else with whom I've had the opportunity to work as a undergraduate student first. And she's now a graduate student, Abigail Schmitz. Why don't we?
Hi, Dr. Pearson. I'm Abigail Schmitz. I'm also the president of the student organization. I've had the pleasure of working with Dr. Pearson for 3 years now in my undergraduate into my graduate career, and now moving into being a first-year teacher. And I've had her support through all of these processes and steps. But she's really inspired my love for social and emotional learning, which is what we want to talk to you guys today about. I'm going to switch slides.
So at the onset, we thought we began by establishing some objectives. I like to walk and talk, just in case you didn't know that's my style. The participants will be able to review research, so we're going to establish that for some context. Won't talk a lot about it, but we really need to kind of tell you.
Don't worry about that. You can do that. But
what it might be around social and emotional learning standards, SEL instruction and implementation, and the importance of efficacy, which is going to be our theoretical framework by which we will establish a foundation for SEL. Okay?
we want you as the participants to be able to identify these SEL standards that we talk about and the classroom application for implementation in every single content area.
And then we thought we'd be able to explain the importance of SEL integration, because sometimes teachers think it's one more thing on their plate. So we're going to reference that consistently throughout our presentation. It's not one more thing on your plate, it is the plate. Does that make sense? Because students do not remove themselves. We don't remove our emotions when we work in an environment like this as adults or wherever you work. So it is the plate, okay? Socially, we have to operate, teams, and we work in groups. So socially, we're going to talk about how we function, and emotionally how we function. So it is the plate.
We also want you to be able to utilize these strategies to actively engage learners, whether it be your students, your peers, your family members, in SEL activities to enhance both the cognitive and affective domains of learning.
And finally, we're going to discuss how metacognition strategy or metacognitive strategies, and we're going to really kind of weave that out or embellish this word of metacognition. Some people say thinking about thinking. Okay, we're going to see what that looks like. We're going to give you some samples of what that looks like today and how they're should be used to enhance and assess learning. Okay?
We're going to get started with an activity, hands-on, lots of colors, lots of fun. Hopefully all of you have some piece of paper in front of you, whether it's cardstock, construction paper, computer paper, or tissue paper, and a marker. I want you to take 30 seconds, and I want you to write in the middle of that piece of paper one negative thing that has been said to you in your life, whether it be a hurtful word or a comment, a stereotype, something that has negatively impacted you in your life. Just one word, one statement, right in the middle of that piece of paper.
I'm a bad listener. Could you repeat that?
Yes. Do you have paper? Okay. You're going to write one word, one comment, one phrase that has negatively affected you in your life. Thank you. Time in the back. Until everyone's done? Maybe, yeah. Before we proceed, is there anyone that would want to share this word with us? One word, one statement that has negatively impacted them? Yes, ma'am. Ugly. Ugly. Has anyone else been negatively impacted by a word such as ugly? Giraffe. Giraffe. Thank you for that. Ugly, giraffe. Lots of stereotypes defined by our appearances and the way that we are outwardly. I want you to take this piece of paper and I want you to crumple it into a ball. So try as we might to get rid of these negative words, these negative comments that are hurting us. We might want to crumple them up. We try to throw them out. They still impact us. So I want you to open your paper up now, please. And I want you to see that every single piece of paper, no matter the type, is crumpled. It has lines, it has ridges. It has been affected in some way by this crumpling that you have done. By trying to remove this word from your life, you haven't been able to, you're still affected by it. However, some of us who are cardstock have minimal crumples, minimal lines. Some of us who are tissue paper are on the verge of tearing, on the verge of breaking. So just like our students, our peers, our friends, our family members, some of us have these skill sets, these coping strategies to be resilient, to bounce back from these negative words, just like our cardstock. However, some of us, some of our students, some of our family members, they don't have those skills. They weren't built in them. We didn't lay that foundation for them to be resilient, to bounce back, which leads to a lot of the issues our students have today with social and emotional learning, with bullying. So with our presentation, we want to inform you of social and emotional learning and how that can help our students and helping them to be successful in their life. Okay.
So Abigail talked a lot about already this whole notion of resiliency. I want to talk a little bit about the notion of having the aptitude, if you will, to establish something that's called coping strategies. We take for granted that students come to us with that skill set, but they really do not. So let me talk a little bit about Daniel Goleman's work. And for those of you who do not know of him, have you heard of the term emotional intelligence? Okay, I have one person. You've heard of it. Okay, well, Daniel Goleman pioneered the term emotional intelligence. We hone in an awful lot in higher ed on the multiple intelligences, how people learn cognitively, right? How do we think about learning, the 9 multiple ways in which we learn, cognitively. But we forget about how we learn, we pick up cues from people emotionally. So he has established there are 4 different types of emotions. One is called perceived emotions. We pick up cues from people's emotions, from like body language, right? Cues, perceived emotions. And then we have something called reasoning emotions. We expect students to come and reason. They're not able to do that, by the way. But we want them to when they arrive to us. That means we want them to facilitate their thought, to understand what's happening to them. That's a long way off. And to regulate what's happening. That's a long way off. That's called reasoning emotions. And then finally, before they reason, there's one called understanding emotions. Do you understand what's happening to you? Well, do I understand that because there's a frown on my face, I may just be in deep thought, right? You may read that wrong. Maybe I just got stopped by a police officer, right? Before I came to work that day, or before. Now let's think about a child. I gave you, as an adult, understanding emotion. As a child, the child, to understand what's happening to that child, the child, you may not know why that child is not focused on your content, right? That child may have slept in his or her car, right? Poverty is very high, by the way, in central Illinois, 60% in this area. They may not have had a bite to eat, right? So understanding emotion becomes an issue. And then finally, then and only then, those 3 levels, next can they then manage their emotions. That's the 4th one. So perceive, reason emotions, understanding emotions, and then managing emotions. It is critical that we understand emotional intelligence. Now, I'm going to give you some statistics later about why that's important, because what happens is we prepare our kids for life. It starts very young. So he's gone a step farther and found out that these skills are now what corporate America looks for when they hire people on jobs that are really effective leaders on jobs, are people with high emotional intelligence, not cognitive ability. Isn't that a surprise? Won't give it away just yet.
So,
Okay, so what does that mean for collaborative academics, social emotional learning? CASEL is out of Chicago. We call them the think tanks. Daniel Goldman is actually on their advisory board. Linda Darling, I think she has, Linda Darling Hammond, thank you, George Blank, who said that? And many think tanks have come around and had this dialogue around emotional intelligence and how do we weave or integrate social emotional learning with the Common Core. So, this is how they've defined social emotional learning, the process through which children and adults, because at one time they just said children, and then they went back to revisit this definition and said, you know, children and adults must acquire these skills. So the process through which children and adults acquire and effectively apply the knowledge. So you're no longer just, understanding what's happening, but the knowledge, attitudes, and skills necessary to understand and manage emotions, set and achieve positive goals, feel and show empathy for others, establish and maintain positive relationships, and make responsible decisions. And that is the definition for self. Out of self, then Abigail's going to talk a little bit about it later, the competencies. So then they begin to develop programming around that definition. Does that make sense now? So we got the context for self. So I thought we should establish context around social emotional learning first.
with social emotional learning, there are 5 competencies that have been established. They're in the cognitive domain, the affective, and behavioral. We want to address all of these areas in our students and in our lives. The first being self-awareness. Are we self-aware? Can we manage our emotions? Can we recognize our emotions? The second being self-management. Once we can identify our emotions, where we stand, what's occurring in our life, can we regulate? Can we manage those things? Once we are moved on from ourself, we move into social awareness. Once we have an understanding of where we're at, if we're upset, how do we manage that upset? We can move forward with our relationships with others, with peers. And that has the ability to also show empathy for diverse backgrounds. Next is our relationship skills. Moving forward, can I maintain this relationship? Can I deal with conflict? Can I move forward in setting goals with myself and with others? And finally, we have responsible decision making. Once I have these 4 skill sets, can I move forward with making these responsible decisions that affect not only myself, but others?
If I may, this term we don't see often in the literature either. We hone in on the cognitive, remember. The affective deals with saying to your student or your colleagues, whatever they say to you out of the auspices of expression of feelings. Affective domain deals with feelings. I feel sad. And I'm a little disturbed by something that was said to me today. That's the affective domain. We hone in on cognitive domain. What is it that you know about biology? What is it that you know about language arts? I was a language arts teacher, so we hone in on only on those things. But the child or our student will not be ready to learn if the affective domain is not intact. You agree? So if their emotions are all out of whack, they just got put on the bus, they just got called the N-word like I did when I moved in my neighborhood in Charleston, America. I call Charleston. So I had to make the decision to manage my emotions. Do I put my things back on the truck? Do I go ahead and move in my house? Right? I had a good sense of myself, my self-worth, my self-esteem, but what if I didn't have that? Some people don't have that, all right? And my support system is here. This is my sister. This is my first cousin. They're here. So I have a strong support system. They've been supporting me all my life. That's all I know. Come out of a 2-parent home, Christian family. But what if I didn't have that support system? And so sometimes, and let me say that Imani is here. Imani, raise your hand. That's my god sister back there. So people have followed me all my life, wherever I am. I left when I was 17, never to return other than visiting my folks. So when I'm in a crisis, those same folks. I run back to my support system. But what happens to those students who don't know how to express their feelings? I say, oh, I'll just tell you when I get there. I'm headed to Memphis. Oh, that's where my folks live, my parents. Oh, they said, what are you doing in Milwaukee? I just arrived in Milwaukee. I need to talk to you. It's like putting your support system together. You know, it's like, we got a little secret. We got to talk about it. And then, you know, you're going to be fine. You need somebody to say, that's our role as teachers. That's our roles as leaders. You're going to be fine. That's efficacy, which I'm going to talk a lot about. Because right now, our districts everywhere are looking very different than our room, right? And those kids are going to need support. And you're it. When you have a high level of teacher efficacy, guess what? Your students soar, even when they don't even know they're soaring. They don't have a choice, because you just instilled in them, we're going to be fine. Abigail, can I tell you a story, then we'll move? Mm-hmm. Okay, Abigail had a story here. She got some support back there. Hey, my support people from that too, Abigail. Okay. Every decision in K-12 is not yours. Okay, so Abigail didn't know that. So Abigail applied for a job. She didn't get that job. Abigail, I was in Memphis. Abigail texted me about the first time to get that job. I said, Abigail, you're going to be fine. It's okay. All things work together for the good. There's a purpose for that. Guess what? You're going to get a job. When you get that job, you're going to be happy you got that job. And Abigail just couldn't see, you know, it's like, looked like bleak, like, okay, whatever you say, Dr. Pearson, that's what you say. Now, I'm not feeling it right now. I'm on the low. You know when you get some bad news? Right? That was her crisis. And all of us go through a storm. It is to test our level of efficacy. And what we have to do, our parents are here. That's our support system, right? It's what support will you provide for the person during their crisis? Does that make sense? Boy, our theme is on renewing hope in education. That's a good thing. And what I saw in Abigail, that level of efficacy, I didn't even know until we were preparing for this presentation. She knew all of efficacy, but boy, she got it now. Because teacher efficacy is so important because it's contagious. You believe in your students, before they even know it, they're succeeding. So now she can share her story with someone else. Make sense? Okay, what we got there? Oh, I'm on teacher efficacy.
Perfect.
So what is efficacy? Efficacy is the cognitive mechanism that you believe in your capabilities to produce a desired outcome despite enormous odds. If that's losing weight, you say, I believe I'm going to lose, I don't know. Give me something. Give me a number. How much weight we're going to lose today? I need to lose no way! I need to lose 20 pounds. Okay, but that is kind of you. Okay. So if that's losing weight, you will say, oh, okay. If that's losing weight, then you would say, I believe that I'm going to lose 20 pounds by December. You don't think about it. When you lose, I didn't say if you lose. What did I say? When you lose the 20 pounds by December, you don't attribute it to luck or failure. It is not attribution theory. Attribution theory attributes it to luck or failure. Efficacy says, it's kind of like saying it's a faith walk. You just believe, your eyes on the prize, whatever you say,
And sit down.
I believe my students are going to score blah, 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 blah on the Common Core. You don't think about it. You don't guess. My students are going to pass this class. Your belief system. Make sense? And those are influenced by something. Oh, before you look at this baby, isn't that a wonderful picture? And that baby believed that she could push that car. That's efficacy. Okay. Then we have something called academic efficacy. one's perceived capability to perform a given academic task at desired levels. Students with a strong sense of academic self-efficacy have been proven to willingly undertake challenging tasks, expend greater effort accomplishing a given task, persist longer in the presence of difficulty, use more effective learning strategies, and self-regulate. Key word here, better than others. Very rare. Not all of your students are going to come to you self-regulated. Abigail seems to be self-regulated. Monica Jennifer. Raise your hand, Monica. They came to me. I was really blessed when I received those students. They came to me self-regulated. They're now teaching between Mattoon and Charleston. And the principals are just sitting back smiling. Because they now have leaders in their building. Look at Mr. Smith. He said, yes, I'm okay. So these belief systems are then influenced by 4 types of influences. You have mastery influence, which means it's authentic. It just happens. All right? I see something. Let's say I see an opportunity. That's an authentic experience. An authentic type of mastery influence. Vicarious influences is vicariously modeled. The key word here being is modeled for you. My mother, my grandmother, my teacher. One of my teachers from Langston University is 85 years old, who's now suffering from Alzheimer's, but she vicariously modeled for me. And just a couple of years ago, when you just almost couldn't, remember who you are, she said, "I get your laugh." She would say, "Whatever you do, don't stop caring about those students." She modeled caring. She modeled nurturing. Okay, so that's vicarious influence. And then you have physiological or emotional influence. Physiological or emotional influence can be dangerous. It can be good, but you have to be cautious here. Some people say, if you tell them, no, we're not going to do something, you have just influenced them emotionally. It's like, okay, because an efficacious person will say, thank you very much. Because guess what I'm going to do? You didn't shut them down. I'm going to do the total opposite. Right? Anybody in here like that? You wired like that? The total opposite of what somebody believes? You're like, yeah, I am. So you say you're not going to make an A in this class? Sometimes. It's like reverse psychology. You just, guess what? Said, sir, you like, related.
Made the A.
You just motivated them to make the A. Now, a person with low self-efficacy, it can become taxing. You can break their spirit down, right? And that emotional distress that you are just beating them down can physically take its toll on them. I'll share my story with you now. But that can happen too. So this can be a dangerous area. And then lastly, verbal persuasion is the type of influence that I think in the African American community is very, very popular. The African American female, the matriarch, very important. We heard things like, or family period in our family. I may not have had the opportunity, but we want you to have this opportunity. I want you to go to college even if I could not have gone to college. And guess what? We believed it. Belief system. We didn't think about it. We didn't say, how are we going to pay for it? We didn't know how we were going to pay for it. My folks were like, Daddy don't have any money. That's what my dad said. Your daddy don't have any money. So guess what? I knew I wanted to go to college. I studied really hard. Everything paid because I got a scholarship. Full ride. You with me? Belief systems. On academic scholarship, by the way. Full ride. Because I believe he said they wanted us to be better than what they were to provide for us. Those belief systems are verbal persuasive. We can do that for our students every day through lessons. And that's what Abigail and I learned. Now talk about how do we shift. Oh, Abigail, I'm still talking? Okay, so this is how we shift. Bandura then, he used to have a bilateral model. But then he said we must look at understanding behavior. So behavior is influenced by the environment. And the environment can impact, personal factors can be impacted by the environment, right? Does this make sense to you, this chart? So it should go like this. Personal factors influence the behavior. This can impact the environment. So it's a reciprocal fashion. It goes like this. Or any way you want to use it. But remember, it's a reciprocal fashion. It's a reciprocal model. Okay. How are we doing?
Dr. Pearson shares with us all about efficacy and being self-efficacious in our teaching. In my undergraduate and graduate work, I was really inspired by this, and I wanted to see where our Eastern students, our pre-service teachers were, and how efficacious they were in teaching social and emotional learning. We discussed these concepts in school, and bullying, suicide, self-mutilization, all of these things that no one programs or teaches us as pre-service teachers to be prepared for in our school settings. And that's what social and emotional tries to encourage, is that we have those foundations so that we can work with our students, they can self-regulate, they can come to us, they can make the decisions to be successful in their lives. But we don't get those skills oftentimes in our pre-service and our higher education. So I did a study at Eastern. However, CASEL did a study which gives us a really great idea of our whole scale, US and Canada.
So, the Collaborative for Academic Social Emotional Learning reports that 83% of teachers stated that they want training in social and emotional learning skills. Yet, a recent scan of Canadian and United States teacher education showed that very few pre-service teachers are actually receiving training in the area of SEL. The lack of SEL training for teachers has consequences for the lessons accordingly, and effectively implementing SEL to create a positive learning environment may impact higher ed in general. When I read that, I'm somewhat concerned, and that's why we became, I think, a social emotional learning organization, because I had to confess, and I said this to Abigail, my graduate experience at Oklahoma State University did not prepare me. When I heard my students saying, they got ready to present their research papers, and they started saying things like, well, to tell you the truth, I tried to bring self-harm to myself. And Tuesday night, we're sitting in a ball. The next Tuesday night is, I tried to take all those pills, or one story led to another story. And I finally confessed, I had no zero. That's at the graduate level, working on my doctorate. I had no preparation. Let's not talk about pre-service, right? Who really prepares teachers to teach depression, self-mutilization, suicide? These are some really hard conversations, right? Because we just drive home content. Who teaches the affective domain? So Abigail then took it a little step further.
Of the 60 people that I surveyed at Eastern, they were all undergraduate students with no teaching experience. 45 of them responded. So I had a really great response to get a foundation. And 75% of them said that they had knowledge of social and emotional learning and its 5 competencies. Now, when we say they had knowledge of, we can say that it was a brief skimming of these competencies. So we still don't have that chance yet at this university and across most in Illinois at least to get into these competencies, to really dive deep to prepare our teachers. But then when asked how comfortable they felt with teaching the competencies, only 30% said they were very comfortable. When the majority said they had the knowledge, only 30% was very comfortable, whereas the rest were somewhat comfortable. So this brings us to how can we make our teachers, our pre-service teachers, our current teachers, more efficacious in their teaching of social and emotional learning in order to give that to their students. If we aren't efficacious in our teaching of SEL and the standards, and we aren't confident in supporting our students, they won't have that confidence to return and come to us.
So what we did come to find out is learning how to learn cannot be left up to our students, it must be taught. Learning how to learn these skills must be taught, okay? And so we thought that we would provide for you a handout, and by the way, you're going to get these handouts in the Dropbox after the conference, electronically. The first one that we're going to reference will be this handout, called Promoting Student Metacognition. It's written by the Department of Biology at San Francisco State University in 2012. And I must confess, it is the best article I have ever read on metacognition. Why do I say that? Because it's not a buzzword. They give you strategies, first of all, what it should look like in your class. What should metacognition sound like from your student's voice? What type of assignments could you give? Then they help us to reflect on what we're doing as teachers or practitioners, okay? So, for the sake of the word, it involves 3, and I'm going to add a steps. When a student is able to be or utilize metacognition strategies, they plan to be successful, okay? They monitor their success. And while this chart says they evaluate, I would say in between they make adjustments. All right, they redirect and they make adjustments accordingly. Now, we're experiencing like something new in higher ed because our students don't always come to us prepared, right? So that means we've got to teach them how to do what? Plan at this level, even from something as simple as how to plan to do homework, how to plan. Remember I said they weren't all self-regulated, right? So how to plan, how to, what's the next one? Monitor. And then later, before they get to evaluate, how to redirect, make adjustments, and then they're ready to evaluate. Okay, so we thought we'd put up one sample. This article is full of samples. We put up the article for active learning and homework assignments. It provides for you in this article, however, what they should do, and you can tell mine's all highlighted, right? I use it. What they should do for quizzes, how they should monitor their success. So it's a wonderful article. You'll enjoy it. But we thought we'd use one sample. So for example, the student would say, what is the instructor's goal in having me do this task? All right, that's planning. And then when they're ready to move to the next step, and they're coming to that understanding, they would say, what strategies am I using that are working well or not working well for me to learn biology or whatever it is that you're teaching? And then in between, they can make adjustments. If it's not going well, because by then they might have their midterm grades right now. They have to make some adjustments, redirect, and then when they evaluate over here, they're saying, to what extent did I successfully accomplish the goals of the task? Does that make sense? So I'm going to encourage you, when you get an email that says, this is an invite to the Dropbox, please review this article. It's life-changing across disciplines. And the reason why I can easily make connections across disciplines is because my degree is in curriculum instruction, really. So it's easy for me to make connections. Okay, Abigail? So, I talked a little bit about this bubble, planning, monitoring, redirecting. And I'm of the view that this is our highest level of blooms. We want our students to become critical thinkers. We want them to generate ideas. We want them to be able to build and combine new ideas, right? We want to be able to see things from multiple perspectives. Social awareness, this is a cell. How do we integrate? This is a cell, S-E-L, competency. seeing things from multiple perspectives. There was another one that I looked at, and I thought I would look at
Decision making.
decision making over here. Generating options, weighing of pros and cons, and deciding on a course of action to take. That's a SEL competency. Responsible decision making is a SEL competency. Are you with me? You see the integration? You see the connections? Okay, good job.
One more. This is it, one more.
And then, sorry?
Daniel Goldman
then-
and Common Core.
Then it would be easier to then make these connections when you look at the Common Core. So what we did was, we put the link, obviously, to the Common Core. You already know what they are. These are common standards. The students, some people love them, some people hate them. But we don't have that debate in here, right? Okay, so these are common standards, best practices from schools across organizations around the country. Here is our ISB website. But then I want you to be willing to look at the Common Core, because the reason why I have somewhat of a buy-in here, because they prepare all students for success in college, career, and life. So that by the time they graduate from high school, they can be a part of Daniel Goldman's work. And Daniel Goldman's work says that over 70% of the students that we serve, when they master the emotional intelligence, these are the skills that the employer is looking for. It's higher than the content. Can you believe it? What type of skills are we talking about? Relationship skills. Can you get along with people? You can do it for with one another. You can know all the science in the world. But if you can't get along with people, you might have your walking papers when you get back to it. Anybody, any employers in here? Mr. Smith? Do you agree with Goldman's study?
Absolutely. Relationships are tougher to teach than
They're really difficult to teach. Responsible decision making, that's another one that's really difficult to teach. So what happened is, when I was in school, I finished in 99, I walked in 2000 at Oklahoma State, he got a big criticism for not having empirical data to drive emotional intelligence. Guess what? Now it's heavyweight. I mean, it's data, the data. So I'll put that in your box. On what organizations are looking for in leaders. And these are the skill sets that we're talking about, SEL. And that's why they work for the Common Core.
With the Common Core, we want to pair SEL and talk to you about integrating these skills into our current lessons. One of the anchor standards, I teach reading and language arts, so for me, I'm always pulling towards the language arts, the ELA standards for Common Core. And one talks about reading complex texts and working for skills such as critical thinking, problem solving, and analytical. This is all pushing for the success in college, career, and life. Well, for us, when we talk about career and life, they need those foundational skills that Dr. Pearson keeps referencing in order to be able to work with others, to manage your emotions, to make positive and responsible decisions. So when we look at these metacognition strategies and we say, okay, well, we want them to be critical thinkers. We want them to be responsible decision makers. Well, what does that mean? It means making predictions, taking multiple perspectives, weighing the pros and cons, and finding patterns in relationships. So it's easy for us to say, let's be critical thinkers, but what does that look like in our classroom? And for us, when we say we want them to draw conclusions, we want them to formulate hypotheses, with that, we look at SEL because we're pairing them up. We're putting them in groups. If they can't regulate that, they're really exhausted, that they're tired, that they're sad, they can't work towards these critical skills that we want them to with the Common Core. So we need to partner these two in order for them to be successful throughout our classroom and moving on into their other roles in their life and in school.
And so, how could we integrate SEL with the Common Core? There's some literature says that there's 50-50. There's 50% of what we do in our classroom that should be guided by SEL. And then there's the other 50% of what we do in our classroom. It involves SEL and cognition. That's our content area. Abigail talked a lot about language arts. We have some examples that we're going to give you today. That includes math, Common Core, for the sake of time, samples, along with science, Common Core. And these are some wonderful samples because we're going to give you the standard, And we wanted to give you some things that you could walk away with, making the Common Core connection and SEL. Okay? So when you look at the math, you're going to see the math standard, and you're going to see the SEL standard. And by the way, for those of you who are new to SEL, if you will type in Illinois State Standard and SEL, they will come up. Illinois, we were one of the few states initially for social emotional learning. And what I am really happy about is that our conference is held at Eastern, while some states have been doing it around brain research, which we're going to talk a little bit about. Oh, brain research. Harvard. We're not a Harvard people, right? We're not a Harvard. We're not Boston. But that's where social emotional learning conferences are housed right now. So brain-based research says all learning is physiological. You know, it includes our minds, our bodies. We got to move. It's because of how we're wired. The brain is social. We naturally want to be around people. So when a person is bullied, relational bullying, that last group was here talking about exclusion, intentional exclusion. I call it strategically omitted from groups. Kids can't handle it. Adults don't like it either, but you know, we might have a little bit, I guess, tougher back. But our brains and minds, we are naturally seeking for social, work in pairs, work in groups. Our brains also, we're seeking for meaning. We are born. A baby comes into the world, baby's looking like this. And then one day we say, where's your nose? You just had a little baby. One day you're going to say that. Where's your nose? Right? The child is seeking for meaning. That's the way our brains are wired. Then, the search for meaning occurs through patterning. We're looking for connections. And emotions are critical to patterning. Why? If we attach an emotion to something, we remember it. Happy? We remember. Sad? We remember. So emotions are critical. The brain and mind processes parts and whole simultaneously at the same time. Learning involves both focus, attention, and peripheral perception. I know I'm rushing now. Learning always involves the conscious and unconscious processes. We archive information long-term, short-term, and learning is developmental. What does that mean? That means as a new faculty, I don't do the same thing, or even as a new teacher, I don't do the same things that I did at that process. Learning is developmental. Complex learning is enhanced by challenge and inhibited by threat associated with helplessness. The reason why that one is important is because when your children do this, when they come to their class or they got to take a test, they can't learn. So I changed my language even. I said, we're not going to take, I read an article that says, when the brain is more relaxed, it can receive information. When it's not, it's inhibited by threat, it can't learn.
So how are we going to integrate SEL with the Common Core standards? Our first thing is that we want you to see, we keep referencing this plate. It's not another piece to your plate. It's not adding more to the plate that you already have with Common Core, with your curriculum, with other standards. We want this to be the foundation. We want you to embed it into what you're already doing. And for most of us who are teachers or who work in the education, we see that this is occurring every day. In our daily lives, in the education system, these 5 competencies we're constantly working on, ourselves, our relationship skills. We want you to take advantage of teachable moments, whether it's just with a friend or with a student. Those competency moments, when you're making a great decision, when you're regulating your emotions, identify those and use those to share with others. We want to promote students' feelings of autonomy, relatedness, and especially this feeling of competence, this self-efficacy in our students. And finally, we want you to provide opportunities for students to see SEL and the competencies in action. We want you to be able to provide for them examples, highlight moments when they have moments of self-regulation, of managing their emotions and skills. I'm going to go quick.
And in a nutshell, from Castle's research, here's what I want you to take away. When integration works, we see positive social behavior, fewer conduct problems, less emotional distress, and more importantly, 11% academic gains. This is a 213 meta-analysis study, a study of studies of 300,000 schools. And here are the results. And so we'll have this study also in the Dropbox. I want to close by just sharing my story. I've not shared it since I arrived at Easton and I thought it was time. Before I ever knew about social cognition theory, namely self-efficacy, I knew that there was something I possessed internally that separated me from my family, my church friends, and other acquaintances. I simply had an uncontrollable drive that would cause me to persevere in spite of any situation in which I was placed. I initially thought it was due to being involved in athletics and student leadership activities and any other roles that propelled me to have an uncontrollable drive to compete. But I eventually learned it was not. It was truly something else. On September 10, 1993, I was faced with the news that my husband was killed in a tragic car accident. And I no longer wanted to live myself. You see, we were two career-minded individuals, madly in love, enjoying life. We were the yin and the yang. He was the science brain, I was the education brain. And they called us Dad at Church. We were actively involved in the church. We were actively involved in our community. And we were truly making a difference in the lives of young people. Until one day, he was snatched away in a matter of seconds. I simply couldn't find myself no longer with that same drive. I no longer even wanted to live. My dad said to my mom, she'll bounce back. And she always has. But to my family's surprise, I was unable to bounce back. And after many sleepless nights, bags of medication, I asked myself the question, why not take all these pills? Well, fortunately, I had a strong Christian foundation, a supportive, loving family, and the secret inside causing me to bounce back. After entering school to obtain a doctorate degree, I learned about theories of development, social cognition, and so much more. And I finally realized what the secret was that I possessed, finishing in 2.5 years that gave me 7. And it was due to the social construct called self-efficacy. It caused me to be resilient enough to bounce back in spite of insurmountable odds that I faced. So now I wake up daily with a new mission. A mission to help others find that secret that's dormant inside of them. The secret to help others identify their strengths and weaknesses so that they may use metacognition skills in order to monitor what's happening to them, whereby they may manage their own emotions. I wake up daily in hopes that we can build relationships in our community with various groups of people who may look very different. No person should feel oppressed or, yes, even excluded from institutions, from classrooms, because they need to find solace somewhere. Finally, my hope is that you will integrate SEL when teaching so that your students will be resilient enough to bounce back, to achieve their desired outcome. So when they experience whatever it is they are experiencing, rather than despair, they will know that they too can have the secret inside. Thank you for coming.
Question.
Yeah.
There's so many kids, more and more kids coming in with autism.
That's a good question.
So do you explicitly start teaching these skills and hope for the best, or what?
The term explicit skills was up there.
Mm-hmm.
So we have in schools, you know how we have character education, we have PBIS, we have advisory in middle schools. So those are explicit skills. But SEL says that we should do it daily. My first comment to you would be we've got to educate people about autism, Asperger's. We've got to first educate. Because I don't think we offer enough education, professional development. That's my first response.
Do you have information about how we educate that particular
Audience?
audience?
Okay, so we have at Eastern a center for autism at EIU. And they have a separate conference. They just finished their conference, by the way. So I can get, if you send me an email, I can get you that information. And we also have a special ed professor, Dr. Havertop, on our committee. Did she present already, Abigail?
She's this afternoon.
She's presenting today. That's another audience. The reason why I'm concerned about this audience, everybody, is because the principal made the wrong decision in Champaign. 30 years. Now the good news is they allowed him to resign. Notice I said they allowed him. But he came back in and resigned after dragging that kid. You know, he drugged the kid. He did some things that was not good because he didn't know how to deal with, right, that audience. You have to educate everybody, not just teachers. And so this is less than 2 weeks old, so if you want to pull it up, you can. It was on the news, Channel 3. Any other questions?
I'm going to add something quickly to that. With autism and our explicit instruction of SEL, I think it's within the education world we often talk about accommodation and modification, and that follows suit here as well. That with these skills, it's not something that we are going to teach in a lesson and expect students to follow with the following day. They're going to be modified. They're going to be taken on a path where students can follow them. If they're not ready, if they're in a social setting or they have social restrictions where they're not capable of these skills, it's something that we will modify, that you work with. And so that needs to be taken as teachers and ourselves to understand the patience and the paths that each of our students has to take, just as they do with our content areas.
That's well said, Ed.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you for coming. Enjoy the rest of the conference. Oh, evaluation.